Hello, hello. How's it going, everyone? Friday morning, thanks for showing up. I know some of the folks here are also speakers, so welcome, welcome. My name's Benny, and I'm one of the co-founders of Future Primitive. I come from Vancouver, Canada, so from the West Coast, represent the teams up there with all their cameras. So a little bit about me. As I said, I'm a co-founder of Future Primitive, and also the co-author of ERC 6551, aka Token Bound Accounts. Previous to that, I was part of the team that wrote the ERC 721 standard, the NFT standard. I was part of the team that launched CryptoKitties at ETH Waterloo, and then we launched Dapper Labs, and then I worked on NBA Top Shot, leading one of the main product teams. So it's been an incredible journey from the cats all the way to basketball. 7 years since the NFTs came out when it was 12 people. Me and Gabby from YGG, and you have Jiho from Axie, you have Devin and Alex from OpenSea, and we would kind of be like the circus trope, flying around to different, to Denver and to different cities, and spreading the word around NFTs, and people would look at us and give us a weird look. So now, 7 years later, I think that future has come to fruition. So yeah, I'm here to. Cool. So, and the other thing that's really special is this week is the 1-year anniversary for token bound accounts. Many of you may or may not know, I'm going to be talking a lot about token bound accounts, or ERC 6551, but we actually released and published the standard, the ERC, last year here at Denver. We were hacking on a project, so it's incredible to come back here and be invited back by the ETHDenver folks to talk about it. So I'm going to bring us back to the 90s, to the internet, the early websites. I'm sure some of these look very familiar. As a kid growing up, I had a pirated version of Photoshop, and I was always like tinkering around with HTML, CSS, and I'm sure a lot of people share that similar experience in our teens. And what I find really fascinating is the web. So, the internet, the web, it kind of kick-started this, what we call the hyperlink era, where you had dispersed websites that are linked to each other via hyperlinks, and it enabled you to navigate websites. You had search engines, and it really democratized the sharing and the website launch. I really think that NFTs are moving into a phase where they'll increasingly resemble modern-day apps and websites, and eventually autonomous agents, offering a lot of new functionality. Right now, we're kind of in this phase where NFTs are static. They're an asset that you put in a wallet, but it could be so much more. So the way I like to think about it is, as with any website or app, there's a front end and there's a back end. The front end of an NFT for us is, I think about it from the context of metadata, traits, and the renderer. And then the back end of the NFT is the on-chain logic, the smart contracts, potentially token bound accounts, which I'll talk about, or a centralized database. So if we're all assuming that the NFT space needs to move forward, that's part of the reason why I'm here giving this talk, well, we have to imagine NFTs becoming something else more than what it is, such as something that's dynamic and stateful. And we're going to break down this on-chain stack and talk a little bit about it. So the front end is composed of the media file. So when you go to OpenSea or any marketplace or Rarible or Magic Eden, etc., or a wallet, you see the actual image of the NFT. It could be a JPEG, a video, it could be a 3D file. That's part of the NFT, the front end. The second part is the metadata. So that's the trait, that's the metadata description. That's all the things that other people look at and evaluate value, etc. And then the renderer. So how is the image composed? Is it composed on an off-chain setting on a server and then kind of uploaded to IPFS? Or is it live rendering? There's just a lot of different things happening here. And there are already tons of standards and protocols and companies working on what I call the front end of an NFT, such as 4906, 7496, blah, blah, blah. There's quite a lot of them. I couldn't list them all. But they heavily focus on changing the artwork, or making the metadata updatable, making traits. You probably heard of metadata trait swapping. So all of those things are great innovations for the front end of an NFT. But when you look at a back end of an NFT, and what do I mean by the back end? Well, things like on CryptoKitties, when you breed the kitties together, the breeding contract is what I consider sort of the back end. It has logic around like, hey, these two tokens together, they merge and they create a new CryptoKitty, right? And so you can kind of see things like Moonbird nesting or doodles, space doodles. That all of those are custom contracts that are not composable at all. You can't simply just fork the breeding contract and then plug and play it into your own NFT project. You have to write it from scratch. So if you are a developer, well, you're going to have to write that contract. If you're not a developer, well, you're going to have to pay a lot of money to hire a developer to write that contract. Not only that, nobody else can use it besides yourself. Or projects opt for no utility at all, so they just launch the NFT and then they walk away. And the third one is they use a centralized database, which I think, as we all know, has its pros and cons, but ultimately we are here because NFTs should be an on-chain asset that's dynamic. And so that's kind of how I envision the back end of an NFT. Now, a lot of people ask, like, how do you kind of think about token mount accounts? Where would you place it? Is it the front end or the back end? And as you can see in this visual, the token mount account is actually complementary to ERC 721. I think a common misconception is that people think token mount accounts are replacing 721. That's entirely not true at all. 6551 is not a token standard, it's an account standard. And so it works really well with 721s. And for the first time ever, we're imagining a future where an NFT has a universal account and identity layer across the entire EVM. That's kind of a mouthful of words, but as of right now, I think everyone in this room, everyone in the stream, when you buy an NFT, you buy it on a singular chain, and to move that asset from one chain to another, it's not impossible, but it's not ideal. It's quite actually broken, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So altogether, this is how we imagine the atomic level of an NFT on-chain stack. It has the front end and the back end. And this is such an important thing to really think about as people are building in this space, or people who are participating or buying NFTs is, where are NFTs going? It's already been 7 years. We went from a very static 10K PFP with the punks, and then we went into breeding and battling with Axes and Web3 games, and then we went back into 10K PFP, which happened about 2 years ago. Then if you're a person of patterns, maybe the next pattern is going back into the dynamic future for NFTs, which I truly do believe in. So the way to think about token mount accounts is, we all know with MetaMask or any EOA wallet or any wallet is you are your own bank account, which I think is incredible and an amazing thing. Number two is you have innovations like the multi-sig or Gnosis Safe or Safe, where your online community or your internet community has its own bank account. That's super awesome. The way to think about token mount accounts is your objects now have a bank account. And I know this analogy is kind of like mind-blowing, but you could imagine this chair has a bank account. It's kind of weird, right? Where, like, imagine you brought this chair into Chase Bank, and you're like, hey, I would like to open up a checking account for this chair. And the first thing they're going to be like, yo, you're crazy. What are you talking about? There's like, do you have ID for this chair? Well, in crypto, we usually bend and break rules like quite often, actually. I'm sure at ETHDenver, there's already been so many new ones. So this is kind of like a simple way to explain it to your friends and family of how token mount accounts work. Is, hey, imagine this chair has a bank account, and I think usually that causes one eyebrow to raise up. But I do think that there are 3 problems with NFTs, and I'm going to go through them and kind of talk about what is happening and how TBAs kind of come into play. The first, I think, is very, very obvious. And, I get a lot of mixed feelings here, right? Where speculation is both good and bad. It's good because it brought new people into the space. It created new communities in this last wave. But at the same time, it also causes issues too, right? Where if everything relies on the whole pumping and the dumping and the floor prices, it's not good. I think we all can attest to it. We're in a good spot now to really look at the data and be like, yeah, actually, it's not ideal. And the other thing is the NFT space is very unequal in some ways, right? The top 10, top 20 projects, they made incredible amounts of money. They've raised even more money, and they've hired an army of devs. They even acquired companies, I'm sure you know, in the last few weeks. And so they have the firepower, but somehow, in some weird way, they're kind of slow in shipping things, even with 300 developers or 200 developers. But what's really unfair is that the 99% of the other NFT projects, simply because they may not have the technical talent to write custom contracts, simply because there are nothing that's available for them to add on-chain logic, they're kind of dead in the water. They end up with no utility. But token bound accounts, because it's retroactive, it actually links to every NFT that has ever existed since CryptoKitties and beyond. That's kind of the amazing thing, is actually we're trying to raise all boats and have all NFTs become incredible assets that are beyond just speculation. Fungibility. So this one's a fun one. I like to use this scenario. So you have your grandfather's camera that he has kept and babied and owned, and he's like, hey, I want to give this to you as a way for you to safekeep. And then you have a water cache or a bank account that you keep in your pocket. And inherently, these assets are very different. I think we can all attest to this. This is not a surprising thing, right? They both have value, but they're fungible in different ways. But I don't know why for the last 4 or 5 years people have been trying to like slice up an NFT into pieces and like create into fragments and make it liquid and make something non-fungible fungible, and you have like weird things like 404 where, hey, you gotta own these 5 balls. It's ERC20, so I like to just play with the scenario. You gotta own these 5 balls, and if you have them, you get the camera. But if you sell 1 ball, well, the camera's gone. All these kind of trickery things that you're trying to introduce to make NFTs, hence the word non-fungible tokens, into fungible tokens, which to me is kind of like makes no sense. And so, I personally think your grandfather's camera does not equal the wad of cash, and we shouldn't try to like slice it up and cut it up and do weird things with the NFT. In fact, we should actually make it more non-fungible. And so, to make it more non-fungible, we have to consider all the parts that make up the camera. That includes the film that's in the film roll, the film rolls in the camera, and there's also all the mechanical pieces that are part of the camera. So not only is it your grandfather's camera, but you have all of these different parts. And so with token bound accounts, we actually go the entirely opposite way. Instead of trying to slice up an NFT to make it liquid, we're actually making NFTs more non-fungible. It's kind of ironic, but it is true. You can see the Moonbird actually owns a Clone X, which owns a shirt. Yes, you can nest NFTs in an NFT and an NFT and an NFT to infinite time. So that's kind of what's going to make NFTs extremely non-fungible and hard to assess the value. Identity. So I have another scenario for you. Amelia, she lives in the US. She's a US citizen. She wants to open a bank account in Japan. But these are fictitious laws, so don't take this as legal advice. It's kind of, there's a statement down there. But let's just pretend that it's required by Japanese law that she needs a visa in order to open a bank account. And so she goes into the Chase Bank in the US, and they're like, yeah, we can work with the government, give you the visa, but you got to freeze all your assets in the US side, your car, your bank accounts. Let's just kind of lock it up, and then you can safely, move to Japan. The really weird thing is that Amelia still has to pay US tax and Japanese tax every single year because technically she's still a US citizen. So one day she wakes up and she's like, uh-oh, well, seems like the bank decided to confiscate the car, her grandmother's ring, and her storage unit, and her bank accounts, all of that, and she's really, really, really sad. Let's replace Amelia with Azuki. So Azuki lives in Ethereum. And now Azuki wants to go to optimism. And right now, this is extremely difficult. It's very costly to do it. You either lock up your Azuki, hence locking up the assets, or you burn the assets and you mint like a clone on the other side. And right now, you have to use third-party bridges or native bridges, where then you have to kind of, it's kind of like the Chase Bank. You got to lock your things there and then trust that it's all good, that all your stuff's going to be there at all times. But this problem gets even bigger when you're thinking about, hey, how does this Azuki transport across the entire world and across the whole L2 network when there are hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of L2s in the future? This problem becomes really, really, really big. And this is where token bound accounts become extremely magical. TBAs are going to be the central point where it is a decentralized registry that's deployed on every single L2. And you have a single address that's the same across the board. So you have a singular address that associates with your mainnet NFT across all L2s. And so it's you could kind of imagine this for yourself. Imagine that just on one day, you snap of a finger, you get access to any country in the world. You get the passport. You can get up to like 100 passports if you want, and you can stay there as long as you want. We all know that's impossible, but TBA, that's the magic trick that I think will be world-changing for the NFT asset class. So a few other things that I want to touch on, I have 3 more minutes, is talk about more on the technical side. So token bound accounts version 2, this is what we launched last March. So it's been almost a year now. So version 2 was really early. There was no cross-chain connection. So the whole idea was that, oh, the NFT on mainnet or on other chains had a TBA account address. Then we built version 3, where now this is the current state of things, is if you have an asset on mainnet, you can actually execute a transaction on Polygon and Optimism. And the thing you cannot do right now is have a Polygon NFT executed mainnet transaction. So this is not possible at the moment. And so we're actually and we have announced earlier this week, but we're forming a partnership with Layer 0, and they've been an incredible partner in opening up. You'll see the next slide. It's going to be mind-blowing. The amount of interconnectivity that's just going to mind-blow every NFT that's out there. So now we're in a reality where we have token-bound version 3 with Layer 0 version 2, where now you have a nouns on Ethereum, and you can effectively transact not only to an L2, but an L2 to back to the mainnet, or L2 to L2. You could see how crazy those arrows are, and it's about to get really, really fun with this new. So this thing's going to be pushed V3 plus Layer 0 version 2 very shortly, I think in the next week or so. And so anyway, we think that TBAs are a fundamental EVM paradigm. It's here to stay. It's a staple. I think the way I think about it is chapter 1 of NFTs started 7 years ago, and it was the idea of a unique digital asset that you can own. Now, chapter 2 of NFTs is thinking about NFTs as on-chain, assets that you can interact with and has a universal account. And then we didn't even get into the other things around on-chain agents, which Jaden, my CTO co-founder, talked about earlier this week. You should definitely watch that talk, because TBAs actually open up access to on-chain agents. And I would kind of put TBAs in this realm of amazing innovations that have really drastically changed the Ethereum environment. ZK proofs, flash loans, restaking, MEV, NFTs themselves, TBAs, all of these are fundamental primitives that have essentially created billions and billions of dollars of value, many, many companies. It has changed the entire way of thinking. And so that is my presentation. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Really appreciate it.